I love America. Admittedly, I'm a bit biased, being an American. But still, I do love America. Even more amazing is that today, America celebrates its birthday. It's been 250 years since the Declaration of Independence was signed, meaning America is 250 years old. Okay, so there was a war we had to fight to become truly independent of Britain, but still, 1776 is generally considered the founding of America, and that's why we celebrate it. Add 250 to 1776, and we get 2026, which means we're celebrating 250 years of America. 250 years. That's a long time, and it's kind of a big deal. Yet, for some people, it doesn't seem like a big deal. Why? Well, I can't speak for everyone, obviously, but I think a big part of it is if you look at America's history, it's filled with lots of bad things. There are many examples of racism, bigotry, and violence, which leads to an obvious question. How can you love a country that has done bad things? I mean, is there anything good at all about America? Well, these are both really good questions that need careful examination. So that's what we're going to do today on this episode of Culture Reforged. Okay, so the best way to get an answer to these questions is to start with that second question first. After all, we all know and are well aware of America's faults. But in these discussions, we never really ask, is America good at anything? Like, anything at all? So let's start there. Now, admittedly, when we ask what is good about America, it's tempting to start naming superficial good things that we like about America. For instance, we could mention that America invented baseball, basketball, and football. Or for any non-Americans watching this, that's American football. Or we could mention Hollywood and the thousands of awesome movies we like and point out that Hollywood is the movie capital of the world. Not America, but the world. We could talk about the fact that America has invented planes and made communication better with things like the telegraph, the telephone, and the internet. However, these things ring sort of hollow for the purposes of our argument. See, a good argument can be made that all of these things that I just mentioned are good in some sense, but really that's more of a superficial sense. Here we're talking about good in a moral sense. After all, slavery is a moral evil. So is segregation. So is all the other things that America has done. Together, these have destroyed thousands upon thousands of human lives. So the real question we're asking isn't has America done anything good, but we're asking has it done anything good in the sense of saving lives or making things better? Well, here's the good news. The answer is still yes. For instance, take American inventor Willis Carrier, the man who invented air conditioning. I know this sounds kind of like a superficial example, until you realize that air conditioning has saved thousands of lives. For much of history, heat exhaustion was a real concern. Today, if you get overheated, you go into an air-conditioned building or an air-conditioned hospital and you can cool down. In most of history, let's say the 1800s for example, you had to find some other way to get cool again. To demonstrate how significant this is, here's a chart based on a study estimating the number of lives saved by air conditioning alone. To be clear, this is an annual number, meaning that if you accumulate it, it comes out to about 200,000 lives that have been saved from air conditioning alone. That doesn't include the fact that hospitals are now safer since they're also air-controlled. Speaking of hospitals, by the way, the US has made significant contributions both scientifically and financially to the eradication and prevention of several diseases worldwide, including things like smallpox, polio, measles, and malaria, all very deadly and dangerous diseases. It's difficult to estimate the contributions of a single country to the prevention of disease, especially given that multiple countries can contribute, and it's also hard to know how deadly an outbreak would be that never happened. But independent researchers have estimated the US have saved millions of lives globally by their contribution. Okay, you might say, reducing disease is good, but what about America exercising its power? Has any good come from that? I don't remember exactly where I heard it, and I wish I could so I could give credit to the person who said it, but I once heard someone say something along the lines about World War II, that the US sent troops to Europe, liberated Germany, and left. The Soviets sent troops to Europe, liberated Germany, and then stayed. In other words, most countries, when they do a campaign like the US did in World War II, they usually stay and keep control over the territory that their troops have taken and treat it like conquered territory. In fact, the Soviets did, creating East Germany. The US, on the other hand, while it did stay momentarily, did eventually relinquish power voluntarily that they easily could have kept. In that regard, it's somewhat reminiscent of American President George Washington, a man who some historians opine could have been king if he had wanted to be. He certainly could have been president for more than 2 terms. Instead, he walked away, relinquishing power that he could have kept. In fact, there are multiple examples of America not really keeping power that it could have kept. Now, I know what you might be thinking at this point. Okay, Nathan, but these are a small sample of things America has done. It has done many other things, some of them really, really terrible, and none of this good stuff that you mentioned makes up for the many terrible things America has done. And here's the thing, you're right, but that's not my point here. The question isn't whether or not the good cancels out the bad. The question is whether there's any good in America at all. And there is. The things that I've just discussed are real examples of legitimately good things America has done. The world, not just America, the world is a better place because of America. And that is worth noting. Of course, this is only our first question, and it leads very naturally into a second, much harder question. In the 1950s and 60s, Hollywood was making films and TV shows that showed a happy America, an America that was well put together, a place that had the so-called nuclear family, with a stay-at-home mom who cleaned the house while the kids went to school and the husband at work. However, the real story is a little bit more complex than that. While these happy families were on television, America was recovering from the effects of World War II, a war that sent almost all of our young men of a certain age overseas, yet many never returned. It was also dealing with the effects of the terrifyingly oppressive system called segregation. On TV, characters like Beaver Cleaver had a happy life. Meanwhile, the reality was, in large parts of America, not a single African American could use the same door, bathroom, or schools as white people. Not only that, but when black people and white people did interact, often they were disenfranchised by being forced to give up their seats or place for a white person. By the way, I'm using segregation as my primary example, since I'm focused a lot on the 20th century so far in this video, but history is filled with countless examples of American racism and oppression. I could have just as easily talked about the Japanese internment, or the KKK, or the Cherokee Trail of Tears, or the awful practice of slavery as documented by people like Frederick Douglass, whose biography, by the way, nearly 200 years later, breaks my heart to read. I'm just mentioning the most well-known examples here. I'm sure we could put our heads together and find many, many more examples. And this all begs the question, how can you love a country this horrible? The good I mentioned doesn't even come close to making up for all the bad examples I've just mentioned in the last few seconds. So how can you love a country that messes up this bad? Han Solo is one of the most intriguing characters in all of cinema. When we first meet him, he is a smuggler, a lawbreaker who makes a living transporting goods the Empire would rather not be transported. Even more interesting is that he's a killer, because yes, Han shot first. Han's last name, Solo, is quite fitting for his character because he is selfish and only cares about himself. Sure, he might help people and do things like save the princess, but that is purely mercenary. Everything from Tatooine till near the end of the movie, Han's motives are purely about the money and have nothing to do with altruistic aspirations of doing good. And yet, Han is universally loved by Star Wars fans everywhere. Which, given what we've just discussed, naturally leads to an interesting question. Why? Why do we like him? That's not criticism, by the way. That's more of a rhetorical question. What is it that makes us like him even though he has lots of bad things that he's done? See, on paper, Han is a self-absorbed jerk who only cares about money, but underneath, there's actually a lot of good in him. Indeed, as Han goes on, he doesn't just start doing good things, he changes. He didn't have altruistic aspirations for good in the beginning, but he did by the end. He knew what was right and decided to choose what was right. And there is nothing more inspiring than seeing a character with questionable morals abandon them in favor of doing the right thing instead. We want him to succeed in this and choose good. And in Han's case, he does. Of course, Han Solo has very little to do with America, but see, actually it does. See, Han's story reminds us that yes, people we admire often do bad things, and that doesn't mean that we excuse the bad things, or certainly model the bad behavior. What it does mean is that we look at the whole person, and we see if there's any good in them, and if they consciously make efforts to choose that good. To bring it back to America, the question we should be asking isn't, has America made egregious mistakes? The question we should be asking is, does America, when given the option, choose good and abandon evil more often than not? And I think under that framing, the answer is yes. And here's why. America has done some terrible, terrible things throughout its history. But that's only part of the story. Yes, America practiced slavery, but it also ended it too. And it ended it not because it was forced to by the world. It's not like some country came in and said, you must end slavery. Instead, while some Americans practiced slavery, other Americans took up the cause of ending slavery and stopped it. Yes, America used the legal system meant to end slavery as a later justification to build another, systemically unjust system called segregation. But it also dismantled segregation, something that was not necessarily a given, and it did so because Americans, not outsiders, but Americans said this is not right. Yes, America has made many mistakes, but it has also fixed many of them. Not all of them, I'm not saying that, but American history shows us that when an unjust system shows up in our country, many times we will ultimately choose to fight the injustice instead of keep it. Now, I want to be as clear as I can here. In no way am I saying that this is an excuse for America's mistakes, or that all the mistakes that we've made in the past are fixed now, or anything like that. In fact, many of the mistakes that we've done, we can't fix. We can't go back in time, for instance, and bring back all the Cherokees who died in the Trail of Tears. We can't fix that. But we can fix the future. Now, I haven't really answered the question exactly just yet, so let me rectify that now. How do we love a country that has done so much bad things in its past? The answer is by seeing the good and rooting for the good so that it will win. You know, when you love someone, letting them continue to do bad things or harmful things or evil things isn't good for them. If you see someone doing drugs and they're a friend of yours, or doing other substances or things like that, or things that are bad for them, and letting them continue to do that, that's not love. That's enablement. Don't enable America to do bad things. Instead, enable it to do good things. How do you do that? By fighting for America to do good. Whenever we're given the choice between good and evil, always fight for America to do the good option, to go the good route. That way, good will always win. And if for some reason we still choose the evil anyway, then fight as hard as you can so that the good will win and that the evil will be corrected. That is true love. That is the truest way that you can love your country. So, today is July 4th, the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. It is arguably the birthday of America and of a new nation. As we go about today, let's think about this and celebrate all the good that America has done. And focus on the good. And in the future, let's fight for the good. But for now, let's not just fight, let's celebrate. Because America has done a lot of good. So let's celebrate the good things that America has done. And with that, happy Independence Day, everyone.